this video I want to talk about NCU choice in Renly Baratheon. But before we start with the first NCU, I want to talk very briefly about one concept we should keep in mind. If you play a roster with 3 NCUs, in my opinion, you should always have one NCU that can be useful or do something without actually jumping on the board. Because in 50% of the time, you will not be able to jump with all 3 of your NCUs on the board. And then they should be able to do something without going on the board to stay useful. And then you don't just waste 4 points or 5 points for a pass token, essentially. Alright, so that's what we want to keep in mind before we start evaluating NCUs. Okay, we start with the first guy, Alistair Florent from the starting box, neutral Baratheon unit. So, shifting loyalties. So basically 3 times in the game, after he claimed the zone, he may switch the zone. Even if there's already other NCU on it, then they just swap places. So, what you can do with this is take away zones from your opponents that you don't need, but you also don't want your opponent to have. For example, opponent has ranged units, you don't have them, or your opponent even have something like war machines or so. So the opponent really wants the swords. You don't really want it, but you also don't want to give it to your opponent. You may just place him anywhere on the board and then spend a token and put him on the swords afterwards. So you get a different effect, but you still take away the swords from your opponent. I think this is especially good in combination with the Courtney Penrose attachment. Command or attachment doesn't matter, because of Might of the Throne, where you can make a melee attack or charge if you take the crown. So, and the crown is not something that many armies want to actually take, so you can take the crown, put Alistair Florent some other field, and then your opponent basically has to take the crown and just zap one of your units, or he risks that you take it again, get another free attack, which he really doesn't want. So it applies pressure in that way. So can be really useful. Is a little bit tricky to use correctly, and maybe I don't like that it's in the starter box because I think it's not so intuitive for new players. Because like he doesn't affect the board or something in a direct way, but that's another matter. Okay, then we go with Courtney Penrose, one of the most popular NCU choices, I think. So 3 times per game, when opponent activates an NCU, you can choose 2 zones, and if that opponent NCU claims either zone, you can heal units across your army by D3 plus 2 wounds. So basically the idea behind this is tactic board denial. For example, you can use it at the start of the round if your opponent is first player and obviously wants to take the swords, for example. You can try to block the swords and one another zone in the hopes that your opponent will then take a different zone and leaves the swords alone. Or he doesn't leave it alone, and then at least you can heal by D3 plus 2. Other option, of course, is if there's only, for example, 2 open zones left, your opponent activates an NCU, then you target those both and hope that your opponent passes instead of going on one of those zones. So, obvious combo with Rose Knights, who would deal damage once they're healed, but obviously with any unit, especially with good armor, wants to be healed. Only problem I really have with him is that the attachment just might be better to take than the NCU, in my opinion at least. But as I said in the beginning, he doesn't have to go on the board to do something useful. That's actually a rare skill that not many Baratheon NCUs actually have, at least on Renly's side. So this might actually, just because of this, might be worth taking actually. Third one, Eldon Estermont. He can replace any zone with the effect draw 3 tactics cards and then shuffle 1 card back in the deck. I think that's one of the best card draw mechanics in the whole game, because you can shuffle a card back in your deck. Like, how many times do you have a really strong card that is just dead in your hand, but you don't want to throw it away at the end of a round, so you just keep it, but it just sits there doing nothing. And with this you have the option to shuffle it back into the deck, which is very unique. Also drawing 3 cards and putting 1 back. So it's better than just drawing 2 cards, because you can grab 3 fresh cards and put 1 old card just back, so essentially you drew 3 fresh cards. Very good. You can also steal zones that your opponent might want and we don't want. As with the example before, your opponent has something where he can attack you ranged, for example, and you cannot. You go on the swords, but instead of doing nothing on the swords, you can draw cards. Super useful. But the effect might be a little bit slow, especially like in the mid game when there's lots of fighting happening. Like usually when there's lots of fighting happening, you want to grab the swords and use the effect. You want to grab the bags and use the effect. You want to grab the horses and want the effect. And even the letters might be a better idea, because you draw cards, but then still can put out a token. So for example, you could put a weaken token up on your opponent and kind of draw cards, but you still, in a way, defend your unit by making it more difficult for the opponent to deal lots of wounds. So in that scenario, just like drawing cards might be a little slow sometimes, especially if you run this in a 2 NCU setup. I think would be difficult. 3 NCUs, different talk. Then you can grab all those crucial zones, and then maybe you just overwrite a zone that you don't really need so much. So another quite common one I want to say, Marjorie Tyrell. Every time she claims a zone, she restores 1 wound, and if that unit is engaged, opponent becomes vulnerable. I think this is a great combo with Rose Knights, because you just heal them 1, they deal 1 wound automatically, perfect. Problem, this might only be really good with the Rose Knights, I want to say, because just healing 1 wound is not a great effect, and the vulnerable effect is kind of conditional. I guess if you play a list that is super grindy and wants to stay in melee for long periods of time, this becomes very good. If you play a highly mobile list with, for example, lots of cavalry that doesn't want to stay in melee, or Thornwatch that doesn't want to stay in melee, you don't often have a situation where you can use this. So it really depends on your list this time. Then my absolute favorite, Olenna Tyrell. She has 2 effects. The main effect is she claims a zone, and then in addition to the zone, one opponent NCU loses all abilities until the end of the round. So you just blank opponent's NCU. I think this is extremely good. This is extremely useful. So often you can just disable some important combo piece of really nasty, annoying NCU that your opponent has. I think it's super worth it. I think it's really, really good. Especially you put lots of pressure if your opponent has like super strong NCU, like for example think of Tywin Lannister for the Lannisters with his bomb. You can just force him basically to use it immediately in the first turn of the game, first turn of the round, or he cannot use it at all. Same, for example, for Balon Greyjoy. If your opponent wants to use the Balon Greyjoy effect late in the round, you can force him to use it immediately or not at all for this round. So really strong. Second ability is also nice. You can basically target 1 NCU, and if they claim the zone, 1 opponent's unit gets D3 hits and become weakened. It's fine for like the first round usually, yeah, but mainly I use the blanking of opponent's NCU. Even though she costs 5 points, I think that's still super worth it. Then the second neutral Baratheon NCU is Shira. I like her because she's a kind of Swiss Army knife. Actually super nice effects. If you grab the letters, you can also remove friendly condition token, and if you go on the bags, you can also give 1 token to your opponent. I think just handing out tokens like this is super strong. Taking away tokens is also super strong. I think we have a card in our deck that lets us remove tokens once they're given to us. But other than that, we really struggle to get rid of condition tokens. So this is a great way to do it actually. And you can basically always remove a condition token and always give it. Doesn't matter if your opponent firstly grabs the bags or the letters, you will always be able to give out a token and take 1 away. I think that's super strong. And on the crown you can heal 1, which is not so super worth it if you just take it for this alone. Problem, in my opinion, is that this doesn't work so good in a list with Olenna. Why? Because usually I want to use Olenna first, because I want to blank the opponent's most useful NCU. So I go on the tactic board. Then the opponent goes usually on the tactic board, and then we go maybe on the tactic board with our our second activation, the third NCU activation, and then very often bags and lettuce may already be claimed already. So then she basically loses her effect. Yeah, we can go on the crown and heal one. If you have Rose Knights, that's still okay, but otherwise it's very like they're conflicting basically for that first jump on the tactic board, and that's why I don't usually take her, to be honest. Then I want to look at 3 neutral NCUs. I think the ones that make the most sense. First, let's look at Shay. Basically, what you can do, like 4 times per game, basically she spams weaken tokens. Pretty useful, yeah. Why not take it? It's just all in all good and decent to have, so why not? Then second neutral NCU, Peter Baelish. So what he basically does 2 times per game, he can go on a zone, and but instead of resolving that effect, you choose one empty zone and take that effect instead. And then you have that once per game where you count as controlling one zone even if you're not on it. So very similar to Alistair Florent, but so he might be better in some situations, worse in others. Why do I say this? Alistair can do this basically 3 times, where he takes one effect but stands on another place. And Peter can only do it 2 times, so that's clearly worse. However, in game modes like Winds of Winter or Dark Wings, Dark Worlds, he gets significantly better. Because in that game mode, you remember with the cards, for example, you are not allowed to take, for example, swords and horses, for example. So, and the great thing with Peter is you just take any other open zone and basically then take the effect of the swords or horses without going on the zone, which means you don't give your opponent a point, but you still get to do that zone. So you get hugely flexible in these game modes. So in that game mode, he really shines. And I think he's really strong in this game mode. I really like him. And then lastly, Lord Varys. In many lists I have him. I think he's just an all-around solid pick. Big thing is he doesn't need to go on the board to be useful. And since I already discussed that I don't really want to use Courtney Penrose all that much, I'd usually take him for my third NCU slot because he can do something without actually going on the board. As you can see, he has 3 order tokens. Each time NCU claims a zone, basically we get a mini version of that zone. I think this is especially good for usually the bags and the horses. With bags we can heal 2, which is kinda decent. And with the horses we can shift one friendly unit 3 inches. I've had many occasions where this actually made a big difference if I can make a charge on an enemy unit or not. Many people just take the horses and don't consider that they can afterwards shift 3 inches. So and usually where they were expecting like, okay, I cannot make a charge because the charge would be on the 4 up or 5 up. Suddenly they don't think about it. They take the horses. I can shift with another unit from mine, and then suddenly it's a charge on the 2 up, on the 3 up, yeah, or just maybe even automatically. So that makes him super useful. I really like him. Many lists I take him. So, what's my usual loadout? I must say, we don't have that many options, sadly. On Renly's side, I feel like with the NCUs, because our faction is split in 2, so we don't have that many options. But usually, my NCU lineup consists of Olenna Tyrell. I think she's just amazing. As I said, just I take Lord Varys, and then the third one is usually toss up between Marjorie Tyrell or even Eldon Estermont. I like him. And in a 2 NCU list, I usually take Olenna and Peter Baelish. That's usually like my standard configuration, I want to say. if I'm not in a mood to experiment a lot. So I hope you could take something away from this, and I see you in the next video.